You call this an ID? Officer Brent Halden held the worn card between two fingers like it was something dirty. He didn't even try to hide the grin stretching across his face. "Sir," he mocked, turning toward the other officers, "our friend here is trying to use an ID older than my entire career." The officers nearby snickered. One actually slapped his desk, wheezing. And in the center of it all stood Elias Turner, 78 years old, spine slightly bent, but dignity untouched. Until today. He had walked in calmly, quietly, asking for help verifying his identity so he could retrieve a small safety deposit box the bank refused to release. He expected professionalism. Instead, he got humiliation. Officer Halden flipped the ID over dramatically. "Expiration 1997, he announced in a fake TV reporter voice. "Mr. Turner, did you time travel here from the 90s? More laughter. Elias didn't flinch, didn't blink. But something in his jaw tightened. The smallest tremor like someone swallowing pain they'd carried for far too long. He tried again, softly. "Officer, if you could just—" No, don't explain," Halden interrupted, waving the card in front of the elderly man's face. "Let me guess. You lost all your real documents, and this is the best you could rummage out of some drawer in your shelter?" That one hit like a punch. A couple of officers stopped pretending and turned their chairs fully. This was their entertainment, an old black man being talked down to like a beggar. Elias's voice came out calm but tight. "I served this country for 32 years. Halden raised an eyebrow in exaggerated disbelief. "Oh, did you?" He leaned in till his breath touched Elias's cheek. "Tell me, did the country ever ask for your service, or did you just show up and hope someone would notice you?" A silence fell for half a second, the silence that comes before a storm. Through the humiliation, Elias remained steady. His eyes, dark and unblinking, held something the officers did not understand, something old, heavy, unspoken. A kind of strength that doesn't brag, doesn't yell, doesn't need to prove itself. It simply is. But to these officers, his quiet dignity looked like weakness. Halden slapped the old ID on the counter. "This trash is expired, and without a real ID, you're not getting anything. So unless you want to get charged for attempting fraud—" He paused, as if savoring the moment. "I suggest you leave before I escort you out myself." A wave of heat flushed across Elias's face, but not from anger, from memory. For a moment, he wasn't standing in a police station. He was back in a dusty desert, boots sinking into sand, the roar of helicopter blades beating against the sky. He remembered voices screaming for cover, the dust storm of bullets hitting metal, the weight of lives depending on him. He remembered courage and chaos. Now he was being mocked by a man who had never seen a battlefield. He reached slowly into his coat. Halden immediately stiffened, hand flying to his weapon. Hey! Hands where I can see!" Elias froze, hand halfway out. "It's just a card," he said softly. Halden hesitated, then rolled his eyes. "Oh great, another card! What now? A library pass? Senior discount?" Elias pulled it out, an old laminated wallet card, cracked at the edges, faded from decades of wear. He placed it gently on the counter, not sliding it, not throwing it, placing it with the care of someone honoring something sacred. Halden squinted, unimpressed. "What is this supposed to be?" Elias didn't answer, not because he couldn't, because he didn't want to. He'd already swallowed enough pride for one lifetime. Halden lifted the card and turned it toward the light, and for a split second, just half a breath, the laughter stopped. Something glinted. Not gold, not silver. Something heavier. Something earned. Paid for in sweat, blood, and years taken from a man's body. Halden brushed a finger over the embossed emblem. What is this?" His voice lost its mocking edge. Just for a moment,
But the other officers didn't see the emblem yet. They were still watching Halden, waiting for him to crack another joke. He didn't. The old card suddenly felt heavier in his hand. Elias stood silent, waiting. The station wasn't laughing anymore. The tone had shifted, subtly, but unmistakably. And Officer Halden had no idea that in less than 5 minutes, every officer in that room would be standing at attention. Because the card in his hand, the one he had mocked, joked about, waved around, it wasn't just an ID. It was a Medal of Honor pass, a pass given only to men who had done the unthinkable. A pass issued only after acts of courage that most people can't even imagine. A pass that outranked every single person in that room. But he didn't know that yet. Not yet.
And Elias Turner, the quiet, humiliated, insulted elder, just kept watching him, waiting for the moment the truth would land like a hammer. And when it did, the entire station would fall silent.
For a few seconds, Officer Halden just stared at the card, confused. The cheap fluorescent lights of the station flickered above him, casting a pale reflection across the laminated surface. He tilted the card slightly, and that was it. That tiny angle was all it took. The embossed emblem caught the light, a 5-pointed star wrapped in oak and laurel, the unmistakable insignia every federal building, every military base, every academy taught officers to recognize on sight. Halden blinked. His voice trembled, barely audible. Wait. But the others hadn't seen it yet. They were still waiting for a joke, still expecting him to toss the card back like a piece of trash. Officer Ramirez snorted. "What's wrong, Halden? The old man finally give you his AARP card?" More laughter. Halden didn't move. For the first time since Elias walked in, his face wasn't smug, wasn't mocking, wasn't entertained. It was pale, confused. His eyes darted from the card to Elias, back to the card, back to Elias. Where did you get this?" he asked slowly. Elias folded his hands in front of him, calm but tired. "You know where." Halden swallowed. The sergeant finally looked up from his paperwork, annoyed. "What's the holdup? Fingerprint him so we can move." Halden didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe. So the sergeant walked over, grabbed the card, and froze. Completely. His lips parted, his shoulders locked, his entire posture shifted from annoyance to shock. Officer Ramirez frowned. "What is it? What's the card say?" But the sergeant couldn't answer. He stared at Elias the way a rookie stares at a loaded weapon, with a fear edged by sudden respect. Then he whispered, hoarse, "Stand up straight." Ramirez blinked. "Sarge, what do you—" "I said, stand up straight." The entire station snapped to attention instinctively, half from habit, half from fear. Even civilians waiting for paperwork jolted upright, confused by the sudden change in energy. Elias didn't move. He didn't need to. He wasn't the one who needed to adjust anything. They were. Officer Halden's throat clicked as he swallowed again. Is this real?" he asked the sergeant quietly. The sergeant didn't answer. Instead, he turned the card around so Halden could see the back, the one part he hadn't looked at yet. There, written in formal ink and official print, "Lifetime authorization. Medal of Honor recipient. Access level, unrestricted upon request. Respect and courtesy required at all times." Halden staggered back like he'd been punched in the gut. Ramirez leaned in to look, and his face drained of color. Someone in the lobby whispered, "Medal of Honor? Oh my God." Another voice shaky, "Those passes only go to—" "No way."
A cold, stunned quiet seeped into the room like fog. Elias Turner, the man they mocked, insulted, interrogated like a nuisance, wasn't just a vet. He was a national hero. A hero of a caliber most people only read about in textbooks, the kind whose name echoes through military halls, the kind who did something so brave, so selfless, so impossible. The country itself carved his legacy in gold, and they had humiliated him. Officer Halden suddenly felt very small. The sergeant cleared his throat, voice shaking. "Mr. Turner, sir, if you'd like a private room, we'll escort you immediately. The chief will want to—" Elias raised one hand gently. "No need." The sergeant almost flinched like the gesture was an order. Officer Ramirez whispered to Halden, "You idiot! You absolute idiot! Do you know what you just did?" Halden felt the room closing in on him. His face turned red, then white, then a miserable shade in between. I didn't know," he stammered quietly. "That," Elias replied softly, "is the problem." The words hit harder than any shouting ever could. And they weren't angry. They weren't cruel. They were disappointed. And somehow that hurt worse. The sergeant straightened fully, taking a breath like a man preparing for a funeral. "Mr. Turner, sir, I deeply apologize for—" But Elias cut him off gently again. "Please. I didn't come here to be apologized to. I came here for help. That's all."
Silence. Heavy, thick, suffocating silence. Every officer stood frozen, some in shame, some in disbelief, some trying desperately not to make eye contact with the old man whose quiet strength made them feel like children. Halden finally found his voice, barely. Why didn't you say anything sooner?" he choked out. "You could have told us who you were." Elias looked him dead in the eye. "I tried." Halden blinked. Elias continued, "But you weren't listening." The words sank into the room like weight on wet soil. Every officer shifted uncomfortably. Because deep inside, they all knew the truth. They didn't listen because they didn't want to. Because they saw an old black man and assumed they knew his worth, assumed he was lying, assumed he was beneath them, assumed wrong. The sergeant stepped forward. "Mr. Turner, what assistance do you need today? Anything, and I mean anything, we will handle it." Elias nodded calmly. "I need verification of my identity so I can retrieve something from the bank." "Done," the sergeant said immediately. "No forms, no waiting. I'll personally walk you through the process." Officer Ramirez added quickly, "Sir, if you want, we can escort you there too." The sergeant glared at him. "You think he needs an escort?" Ramirez's face flushed. But Elias smiled gently. "No escort. I'm not fragile." Halden stepped forward slowly, shame burning through him like acid. "Mr. Turner, I'm sorry for how I treated you." The apology trembled, weak, but real. Elias considered him for a long moment. Then he said, "Don't be sorry to me. Be better to the next person who walks in." Halden swallowed hard. Behind him, every officer felt that same sting. Quiet, painful, instructive. The sergeant cleared his throat. "Mr. Turner, sir, if you're ready, we'll begin the verification process." Elias nodded once, but before he could take a step, the door to the station swung open with a sudden slam. A gust of cold air rushed in. Voices, footsteps, radio chatter, and then the unmistakable synchronized stomp of military boots. Every officer turned, every jaw dropped, every back straightened instinctively,
because walking through the door were 3 men in dress blues and 2 in dark federal uniforms, all headed straight for Elias Turner. Not casually, not politely, with purpose, with urgency, with respect. Officer Halden whispered, "Oh God, who are you?" Elias closed his eyes for a moment. He knew exactly who had come, and the officers, they were about to learn that embarrassment was only the beginning.
Officer Kane didn't stop. If anything, the humiliation only intensified. He stepped closer, invading the old man's space, voice dripping with mock authority. "Sir, you're holding up the line and refusing to provide valid ID. That's obstruction. I'm this close to citing you." He held his thumb and forefinger barely an inch apart, like he was talking to a child. The gesture alone made people watching shake their heads. The elderly black man, Mr. Lewis Hargrove, blinked twice, the same way someone blinks when they're trying not to cry. Not out of fear, but out of shame. Because nothing stings more than being talked down to in public. A woman behind him whispered to her husband, "Why is he treating him like that? He's clearly not a threat." But Kane heard none of it. He was too busy enjoying the performance. "Empty your pockets," he demanded. Lewis hesitated. He didn't want to pull out the one thing he never showed unless absolutely necessary. The old, worn leather wallet with the gold-etched pass tucked inside. A pass that wasn't a visitor's card, wasn't a souvenir, and definitely wasn't anything you could fake. A pass issued only to a very specific group of Americans. But Kane didn't know that, and he didn't care enough to find out. "Can you even see properly, old man?" Kane sneered. "If you can't keep track of your ID, maybe you shouldn't be driving. Or—" Lewis finally broke. "I told you," he said quietly, gravel in his voice. "That ID means something. Just give me a minute and let me explain." Kane cut him off, loud and sharp. "What it means is expired. Nothing more, nothing less." Then he laughed. Not a chuckle. A loud, dismissive, look-at-me laugh. You could feel the second-hand embarrassment spread through the line. People shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Some glared at the officer. A teenage boy recording whispered to his friend, "He's bullying that man for no reason." Lewis's hand shook. He wasn't shaking because he was scared. He was shaking because he was angry. The kind of anger that builds only after years of being talked to like you're less than everyone else. But still, he kept his calm. He reached into his wallet. Kane rolled his eyes dramatically. "Oh, here we go. Another fake card, another excuse. Sir, unless you're about to show me a passport or—" And then he stopped mid-sentence, because Lewis pulled out something that didn't look fake, didn't look cheap, didn't look normal. It was a heavy, embossed pass with a gold eagle at the top, a series of engraved numbers, and a signature that made the crowd gasp. A signature no one mistakes. A signature every American has seen at least once. Kane frowned. What is that supposed to be? He took it from Lewis without asking permission, another mistake, and held it up like it was a toy. The security guard at the door, who had been pretending not to notice the chaos, suddenly froze. His eyes widened. One glance and his entire posture changed. He stood straighter. He cleared his throat. And he murmured, almost to himself, "Oh my God, that's not just an ID. That's a Medal of Honor access pass." Two women in line gasped. The teenage boy filming nearly dropped his phone. Several people stepped back instinctively, like they were witnessing something sacred. But Kane? He laughed again. Oh, what? He snorted. This is some souvenir from a museum gift shop. The security guard turned pale. No, officer, it's not. But Kane wasn't listening. He held the card up between two fingers like it was junk mail. So you expect me to believe you, he jabbed a finger at Louis, have a Medal of Honor pass? Really, you. The emphasis on you hit harder than a shove. Louis closed his eyes, steadying himself. Not because he was embarrassed, he'd faced worse in his life, but because he hated the attention. I don't expect you to believe anything, he said quietly. I expected you to read it. That simple sentence shifted the air in the room. It had weight, history, pain, and dignity. The kind of dignity bullies can't stand. Kane scoffed again, shaking his head. Sir, you're wasting my time. This is going in my report as... And then, a voice boomed from behind the counter. Officer, put that down. Everyone turned. The bank manager, gray suit, stern eyes, was coming out of his office so fast he nearly knocked over a chair. He strode toward them, face drained of color. Kane frowned. Sir, I was just... That's not a toy, the manager snapped. That is a federal access credential issued only to living recipients of the... Kane looked down at the card again, then back up, then down again. The name etched in gold, the branch, the rank, the date. His mouth fell open. His face drained. His hand began to tremble. The crowd didn't breathe. Because in that moment, Officer Kane realized he had not just mocked a senior citizen, not just bullied a harmless man, not just humiliated someone in public, he had insulted a war hero. Not a veteran, not a retired soldier, a Medal of Honor recipient. A title granted to the bravest 0.0002% of service members. The bank was silent. Kane stepped back like he had touched a live wire. I didn't know. You didn't say. Louis looked right into his eyes and said, with the quiet power of a man who had survived more than Kane could ever imagine, You never asked. And the room shook with that truth. That was the moment everything changed, and no one, especially Officer Kane, saw what was coming next. Because someone else had entered the bank. Someone who recognized that gold-etched pass even before they saw the name. Someone who made the entire room straighten, fall silent, and step aside. The silence in the bank was so thick you could feel it pressing on your skin. Officer Kane stood frozen, hand still half raised, breath caught in his throat, staring at the Medal of Honor pass like it had suddenly turned radioactive. Louise just stood there quietly, hands clasped in front of him, the way someone stands when they've been disrespected so many times they've learned to let other people reveal their own ignorance. But the silence didn't last long, because the glass doors at the entrance slid open, and a large shadow fell across the polished floor. A man stepped inside. Broad shoulders, navy blue suit that probably cost more than the bank lobby, close-cut hair, eyes scanning the room like he'd been trained to read danger before anyone else sensed it. People shifted automatically, as if their bodies knew they were in the presence of someone who commanded respect without raising his voice. He didn't look angry, he didn't look rushed, he didn't even look surprised. He looked prepared, as though he had already been briefed on exactly what was happening. The manager's eyes widened the second he saw him. "Oh, Director Hayes, sir. We weren't expecting—" The man held up one finger, a calm, quiet gesture, but it shut the room down instantly. Every conversation stopped, every whisper vanished. Even Officer Kane straightened his posture out of pure instinct. Director Samuel Hayes, head of the state's Veterans Affairs Division, a man whose signature could open locked doors in every federal building, a man who had attended Medal of Honor ceremonies and personally visited the families of soldiers whose sacrifices could never be repaid. And right now, he was staring directly at Louise, not with confusion, not with suspicion, but with recognition. Hayes walked forward slowly, his footsteps echoing in the now silent lobby. He stopped in front of the trembling officer. His eyes dropped to the gold-etched pass in Kane's hand. Then he looked up, expression calm, voice even, but carrying the kind of weight that made your spine straighten involuntarily. "Officer, why are you holding his credential?" Kane swallowed so loudly the crowd heard it. He presented expired ID and wouldn't step aside, and the pass looked fake, and I didn't know." Hayes didn't blink. "Didn't know?" He repeated the word slowly, like tasting something sour. "You didn't know what a Medal of Honor credential looks like?" Kane opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked like a man who had just realized the hole he dug was much deeper than he thought, and he was still holding the shovel. Hayes didn't wait for the officer to answer. Instead, he turned his attention to Louise, and suddenly, this towering man in a designer suit bowed his head. Not dramatically, not for show, just slightly, respectfully. "Mr. Hargrove," he said softly, "I would have come sooner if I knew it was you." Louise exhaled, shoulders sagging slightly. "Sam," he said with a tired smile, "didn't expect to see you today." "You shouldn't have had to call me." Hayes's jaw tightened. "I am deeply sorry for whatever was allowed to happen here." The crowd looked between them, shock rippling through the room. They knew these two men had history, serious history. Hayes turned back to Kane. "Give him his pass." Kane practically shoved it into Louise's hands, palms sweaty, face bright red. Louise took it gently, like he was afraid Kane might drop it. But Hayes wasn't done. Not even close. "You detained and ridiculed a Medal of Honor recipient in public. Do you understand the severity of what you did?" Kane nodded frantically. I made a mistake, sir." Hayes stepped closer. "No, you made an assumption." The room buzzed with murmurs. Hayes continued, tone calm but cutting. "You assumed he didn't belong here. You assumed he was lying. You assumed he wasn't worth listening to." Kane looked down, face burning with shame. "And worst of all," Hayes added, "you held his Medal of Honor credential like it was a cheap hotel key card." The teenage boy recording whispered, "Oh, he's done." But Hayes wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. Real authority doesn't scream. Then Hayes said something that made the entire room lean forward. "Do you even know what this man did to earn that pass?" Kane shook his head. The manager swallowed hard. The crowd went silent again. Hayes looked around the room, making eye contact with everyone, each person feeling the weight of the moment settle into their bones. "Mr. Louise Hargrove received the Medal of Honor for actions that saved 12 American soldiers in the Corandel Valley. He was gravely wounded, refused evacuation, and, according to sworn testimony, used his own body to shield a fellow soldier during an ambush." People gasped. Someone whispered, "My God!" Hayes continued, "He served this country with courage that most of us can't even imagine. And today, he came here to deposit a check and was treated like a criminal." Louise shifted uncomfortably. He hated attention. Heroes usually do. But Hayes wasn't finished. "Officer," he said, stepping back toward Kane, "do you understand that your conduct today could be considered harassment of a protected federal honoree?" Kane's eyes widened. "What? Sir, please, I didn't, I would never—" Louise lifted his hand, gently. "Sam, let the boy breathe." Hayes sighed. "Louise, you're too forgiving." "Somebody has to be," Louise replied with a small smile. The tension in the room cracked, slightly. But then,
Hayes turned toward the bank manager. "Lock the doors." The manager stiffened. "Sir?" "Lock the doors." The metallic click echoed through the lobby. Everyone's heart pounded. What was happening? Why were the doors locked? Was someone else coming? A murmur spread through the crowd. Hayes spoke again. "Because if there's one thing I've learned in my career," he looked directly at Kane, "it's that accountability arrives faster than people expect." And right on cue, the glass door behind them lit up with flashing red and blue. A convoy, SUVs, unmarked cars, a military-plated vehicle. The crowd gasped. Officer Kane stumbled backward, whispering, "No, no, 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 this can't be for—" But it was, because the people who stepped out of those cars weren't ordinary cops. They were wearing pins, badges, insignias, uniforms that matched the credential Louise carried. It wasn't just anyone coming. It was a group of people who knew exactly who Louise was and exactly what had just been done to him.
The bank lobby went dead silent as the first figure stepped through the glass doors. A tall woman in a crisp navy blazer, her badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. Every move she made was controlled, precise, the kind of confidence that comes from decades of carrying weight heavier than most people ever will. Behind her came two men in dress uniforms, ribbons lined across their chests, then another pair in federal windbreakers, then three more. Within seconds, 10 agents and officers, military, federal, and state, walked into that tiny bank lobby like a wall of authority. Not one of them looked confused. Not one of them asked questions. They moved with purpose, like they already knew the entire story. Officer Kane froze. He looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. A few customers placed their hands over their mouths. Others backed up instinctively, like they were watching something historic unfold. The lead woman walked straight toward Lewis, not toward Hayes, not toward the bank manager, not toward Kane. Lewis. And when she reached him, she did something that made everyone's lungs stop working. She saluted. A crisp, formal, respectful salute, the kind soldiers reserved only for those whose sacrifice changed lives. "Master Sergeant Hargrove," she said, her voice steady but warm. "It's an honor to finally meet you." Gasps rippled through the room. Hayes stepped aside, watching with a mixture of pride and something deeper. Sorrow, maybe, for everything Lewis had endured without recognition. Lewis cleared his throat softly. "Colonel Diaz, I'm no Master Sergeant anymore. But you earned the title. And some honors never expire." The room absorbed that like a punch straight to the chest. Behind her, the other veterans and agents moved into a line, straight-backed, respectful, forming a human shield around Lewis. Not to protect him from danger, but to show the world who he was. Colonel Diaz turned toward Officer Kane. "Which one of you detained him?" Kane's lips trembled. I didn't know who he was. His ID was expired and—" "His ID," the colonel repeated, eyes narrowing. "You mean the thing he carries because of sacrifices that nearly killed him? The credential he earned when you were probably still in high school?" Kane's face turned white. One of the agents stepped forward, a broad man with a quiet voice. "You didn't just disrespect a veteran. You disrespected a Medal of Honor recipient." The weight of that sentence landed like a sledgehammer. The teenage boy filming whispered hoarsely, "Bro, this is insane." Colonel Diaz continued, her voice sharp but controlled. "You put your hands on him. You humiliated him. You mocked him in front of civilians." Kane blinked rapidly, panic rising. I was just following protocol." "No," she cut him off with the clean precision of a blade. "You were following your assumptions." A woman in the crowd choked back a sound, a mix between a gasp and a sob. Colonel Diaz took a slow breath, then addressed the entire room. "Every time a veteran walks into a public space, they carry the invisible weight of what this country asked them to do.
Some carry scars you never see. Some carry memories they can't explain, and some, like Mr. Hargrove, carry the burden of surviving what others didn't. Her voice softened, but the intensity didn't fade. Respect isn't optional. It isn't a suggestion. It isn't something you give only when someone looks important. It's a duty. Her words hung in the air, heavy and electric. Then she turned back to Lewis, her expression shifting into something almost maternal. "We received your call. What do you need from us today?" Lewis sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I didn't call for trouble, I wanted to open an account." The lobby cracked open with awkward, embarrassed silence. One of the veterans murmured under his breath, "Lord, give me patience." Colonel Diaz smiled at Lewis, a warm, real smile, then turned to the bank staff. "Who is the branch manager?" A shaky hand rose. "Me." The manager tried to stand straight but failed miserably. Colonel Diaz didn't raise her voice. "Sir, you are going to personally assist Master Sergeant Hargrove, and you are going to do so with the respect he deserved from the moment he walked through your door." "Yes, ma'am," the manager whispered. "And Officer Kane." Kane swallowed hard. "You will be filing a misconduct report within the hour, and you will attend a mandatory training course on veteran recognition and respectful engagement." Kane nodded, eyes red. "And you will apologize," she added softly. Kane turned to Lewis, throat tight. I'm so sorry. I misjudged you. I should have listened. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that." Lewis gave a tired smile. "Son, just treat the next man better." And then
One of the agents stepped forward, pulling out a small velvet box. The room held its breath. "Mr. Hargrove," the agent said, "this was sent to you months ago. You weren't at the ceremony. We've been trying to deliver it." Louis blinked, confused. The agent opened the box. Inside was a distinguished service medal engraved with Lewis's name. The lobby erupted in quiet awe. Lewis's breath caught, eyes stinging. He whispered, "They didn't have to." Colonel Diaz spoke gently. "They did. And now the whole world gets to see the man you really are." The veterans surrounded him in a circle, not protective, but celebratory. Customers watched with reverence. Phones captured every moment. Officer Kane stood silently, learning the lesson of a lifetime. For the first time since he entered the bank, Lewis stood tall, not small, not invisible, not dismissed. He stood like the man he had always been, a hero whose worth wasn't measured by an ID card, but by a life of courage.
No one in that bank lobby realized it yet, but within minutes, the world would. The teenager who'd been filming the entire confrontation posted the video to TikTok with the caption, "Officer mocks elderly man, then finds out he's a Medal of Honor hero." In the first 18 minutes, it hit 2 million views. By the time Lewis walked out of the bank with Colonel Diaz and the other veterans beside him, the sidewalk outside was already filling with people. Customers from the bank rushed out after him, some to apologize, some to thank him, some simply because they felt they had just witnessed history. Colonel Diaz leaned close and whispered, "Sir, brace yourself. Your life is about to change." Lewis frowned. "Ma'am, I was just trying to cash my check." She chuckled softly. "And instead, you taught the whole country a lesson." The viral explosion. Phones buzzed simultaneously inside purses, pockets, hands. People looked down, then looked at Lewis, then back at their phones. Whispers spread through the crowd. "That's him, the veteran from the video. Is that the guy who got slammed over an expired ID? He's the hero, the Medal of Honor man." In 45 minutes, the clip hit 14 million views. In 2 hours, it reached every major news network. CNN called him the silent soldier. Good Morning America called him America's forgotten hero. Veterans Today called him the man who carried the country alone. Hashtags began trending. Hashtag respect our vets. Hashtag he deserved better. Hashtag honor Lewis. Within 1 hour, thousands of veterans had stitched the video, offering their support, their outrage, and their stories of being similarly overlooked. A retired Navy SEAL said on camera, "That officer didn't just disrespect Lewis, he disrespected every one of us who ever wore a uniform." A woman whose husband died in Afghanistan wrote, "My husband's ID expired too. His worth didn't." Lewis didn't post a thing, didn't comment, didn't go live. He barely even understood how TikTok worked. But his story, his cane, his dignity, it traveled without him. Kane's consequences. By early evening, Officer Kane's department was drowning in calls. News vans pulled up outside the precinct. Reporters shoved microphones toward the entrance. Why wasn't the Medal of Honor ID recognized? Has the officer been suspended? What steps will be taken to retrain law enforcement on veteran protocol? Does the department acknowledge profiling? A spokesperson tried to answer, but the reporters kept firing questions like arrows. Inside, Kane sat at his desk, head in his hands. The chief stood over him. "You didn't just embarrass this department," he said coldly. "You embarrassed the entire country." Kane's voice cracked. "I didn't know. That's the problem." The chief slammed a form onto the table. "Effective immediately, you're suspended pending review. And if you want a future in this department, you will complete federal veteran recognition training and implicit bias coursework." Kane swallowed. "Yes, sir." But the chief wasn't done. "You will apologize to him publicly, not because the world is watching." He leaned closer. "Because a man who bled for this country deserved your respect." Lewis's phone starts ringing. Lewis sat at home, his old recliner creaking under him as he watched the news replay the clip over and over. He winced every time he saw Kane shove him. Marie, his late wife, smiled at him from a framed photo on the shelf. He whispered to it, "You always told me people would care someday." He dabbed at his eyes. Just then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Lewis Hargrove?" A deep voice, calm, authoritative. "Yes, sir." "This is Secretary Donovan from the Department of Veterans Affairs. I wanted to personally apologize for the treatment you endured today. It was unacceptable, and we are opening a formal inquiry into police training failures." Lewis blinked hard. "Sir, that's not necessary." "It is. And Mr. Hargrove, thank you for your service. You're a national treasure." Before Lewis could respond, a second call came in. Another unknown number. He picked up. "Master Sergeant Hargrove, this is General Langley of the United States Marine Corps. The Corps stands behind you. Anything you need, medical, financial, emotional support, we will provide." "General, I don't deserve all this fuss." "You earned every bit of it." Another call, then another, and another. By nightfall, Lewis had spoken with the governor, 3 retired generals, the director of Veterans Affairs, a senator who served in Iraq, and the head of the Medal of Honor Foundation. Each one apologized, thanked him, offered to help. But none of that compared to the message he received next. A simple text from an unknown number. It read, "I would like to speak with you, Master Sergeant. _from POTUS." Lewis stared at the screen, stunned. His hands shook so hard he nearly dropped the phone. He whispered into the empty room, "My God, what is happening?" The world took a side. By 10 p.m., veterans across the country gathered in uniform outside police departments, courthouses, and city halls, demanding better treatment for those who served. People lit candles. Some held signs that read, "Honor our heroes. Respect their service. Listen before you judge."
The police department issued a frantic statement promising reforms. But nobody cared what they said. The world cared about Lewis, about his dignity, his quiet strength, his refusal to fight back even when he was handled like a criminal, and above all, about how many like him were still suffering in silence. Former soldiers posted, "This wasn't just about Lewis, it's about all of us." The final blow. At 11:42 p.m., the most shocking moment of the day arrived. The White House issued an official statement. Master Sergeant Lewis Hargrove is invited to receive personal recognition from the President of the United States for his service and sacrifice. The internet exploded. Comments flooded in. He deserves everything he's getting. Protect this man at all costs. I'm crying. This is America at its best. Heroes walk among us. And somewhere in his quiet living room, Lewis whispered again to the picture of his wife, "Marie, they finally see me."
The station grew silent the moment the captain finished speaking. It was the kind of silence that presses on the walls, thick enough to make every officer suddenly aware of how loud they were breathing. Officer Trent swallowed hard. His face, already pale, went sheet white, because standing behind the captain, quiet, steady, and now fully aware of everything that had happened, was a second man in uniform. But not a police uniform, a Marine Corps dress uniform, deep navy blue, golden buttons, white gloves, chest full of ribbons, not decorative, not for show, but earned stitch by stitch, mile by mile, scar by scar, and engraved in solid metal, gleaming under the fluorescent lights, hung the unmistakable symbol, the Congressional Medal of Honor. The room froze. Trent's voice cracked. "Wait, I don't understand." The Marine did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Officer," he said, stepping forward with calm authority, "you detained a national hero because his ID was worn. That man has bled for this country more than anyone in this building ever will." The officers standing around Trent all shifted uneasily, suddenly unsure where to look, suddenly ashamed of ever laughing at that wallet, that ID, that man. But the Marine wasn't done. He turned to the captain, then to the room at large. "Do you know why his ID is faded?" he asked quietly. No one answered. "He keeps it in his breast pocket, close to his heart, because it reminds him of the men he lost, men who never came home, men who never got to live long enough to have an expired ID." The weight of his words felt like a hammer. Officer Trent felt his stomach twist. His mouth opened, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain, but the Marine raised his hand sharply. No excuses. Another beat of silence. The Marine stepped aside, and Mr. Lawson, the elderly black veteran Trent had mocked, slowly entered the room. His walk was steady, not fast, not weak, but full of that quiet strength that only comes from surviving things most people never speak of. His eyes met Trent's, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with something worse, disappointment. Trent couldn't look away. "Sir," he stammered, voice trembling, I didn't realize Mr. Lawson lifted a hand gently. "Son," he said, his voice calm but unshakably firm, "respect isn't something you give only to people you recognize." Every officer in the room lowered their gaze because they knew, all of them, that the lesson wasn't just for Trent. Lawson continued, "If you wait for someone's resume before treating them like a human being, you've already failed your badge." The words hit harder than any lecture, harder than any formal reprimand. And then he stepped forward. "Officer Trent," Lawson said quietly, "look at me." Trent forced himself to raise his head. Mr. Lawson extended his hand. A moment of confusion flashed across Trent's face. Why would the man he humiliated offer his hand?
Lawson answered without being asked, "You stand. I'll meet you there. But next time, make sure you meet others there too." The captain let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. The Marine nodded in respect, and Officer Trent, with tears threatening to spill down his face, took the veteran's hand, not out of politeness, not out of obligation, but because he knew, in that moment, he had been given something he did not deserve: grace. And that's when the captain spoke again. "Mr. Lawson, we'd be honored if you'd stay for a moment. There's something we'd like to do." But whatever that was,
The captain cleared his throat, his voice carrying a respectful weight the station rarely heard. "Mr. Lawson," he said, "please come with me." The room shifted aside as the elderly veteran walked to the center, slow, steady, dignified. Every officer straightened as he passed. No order was given. It just happened. Respect does that. The Marine in dress urus followed behind him, then stepped to Lawson's side like a guardian silently standing watch. And that's when the captain opened a drawer, pulled out a velvet-lined case and placed it gently on the table. Trent frowned. The officers whispered. Mr. Lawson looked confused. The captain spoke again. "This department has never done this before, but today, it's the least we can do." He opened the case. Inside was a brand new, polished, laminated, gold-trimmed lifetime identification pass, the kind reserved for heads of state, decorated veterans, and only a handful of Americans whose service was considered beyond measure. At the bottom, in small lettering, "Special Honor Status, by order of the state." Gasps echoed through the room. Mr. Lawson's hands trembled, not from age, from something deeper, the kind of emotion that a lifetime of holding it together still can't brace against. The captain continued, "Sir, your original Medal of Honor ID wasn't expired. It was worn because you carried it everywhere, a reminder of your sacrifice. Today, we'd like to make sure you never have to explain that again." He turned to the Marine. The Marine raised his voice, crisp, formal, ceremonial. "Sergeant Major Lawson, United States Marine Corps retired. In recognition of your valor, sacrifice, and continued service to this nation, you are hereby issued permanent, unrestricted federal identification privileges, effective immediately." The station fell into total silence. Then something unexpected happened. The officers, one by one, began to stand straighter, hands at their sides, shoulders squared. It took Trent a moment to realize what was happening. They were lining up, not to arrest him, not to lecture, but to offer something very few earn: a salute. The captain looked at Trent. "You first." Trent's stomach nodded. He stepped forward, eyes burning, throat tight. He raised his hand to his brow, not the lazy, arrogant gesture he used at traffic stops, but a real salute, proper, precise, respectful. Mr. Lawson returned it slowly and with a small, warm smile. Then the next officer stepped forward, and the next, and the next. The line wrapped halfway around the station. A ceremony no one scheduled, no one rehearsed, no one predicted. A ceremony born out of truth finally seen. When it was over, Mr. Lawson spoke, voice steady, eyes full. "I didn't come here for honors," he said softly. "I came here for dignity. And dignity should never require a medal." Those words hit harder than anything said that day. The Marine nodded. The captain swallowed. Even Trent blinked back tears. And when Mr. Lawson finally walked out of that station, new ID in hand, dignity restored, every officer in the building stood at attention as he passed.
The automatic doors opened. Sunlight poured in. The veteran stepped into the golden light like he was walking into a second lifetime. And for the first time since the incident began, Officer Trent truly understood. Respect isn't earned by power. Power is earned by respect.